hell is going on? I give you girls a place to stay and hang out, and what do? You disrespect my home? You just trash it and party? Clean this up!
Where are you going?
I gotta meet Doug. So what do you think you're gonna have?
I'm just gonna have what I usually have, burger and fries. How about yourself?
Think about maybe the turkey. Haven't had that in a while.
That always looks good when you get it. You want to see the page?
I guess.
All right. It's got to be done quick. Yeah, it's a piece of cake, man.
You gotta be kidding me. Tomorrow? What do you always got to put these cracks in these scales on the monsters?
Hey,
and stuff?
it could have been worse. Be glad it's not a 2-page spread. Or one of them trifolds.
You know what? Don't worry about it. I'll get it done. Don't sweat it. I'll get it done. Hi, my name is Tom Nguyen, and I'm here to instruct the viewers on how to ink a complete page in the comic book style, and I will show you my method of doing it with my preferred tools. I just got back not too long ago from picking this page up from Doug. I have a very tight deadline, so I'll try to do this in a timely manner, but also do it with enough quality so you guys will learn from it and it won't embarrass me too much. So let's get started with the tools that I will use. The inker's tools are much more extensive than the penciler's tools. I prefer a sable hair brush. Personally, I like the Winsor & Newton Series 7s. They come in different sizes. Here I have a 0 or an aught. I don't know why they call it that. This I believe is a 1, and this is a 5, and this is to fill in the big black areas. These ones are more for the smaller details. Most of my work is done with the brush, and then I'll do some touch-up work with the technical pen and the Crow Quill pen. This is what a Crow Quill pen looks like. This is a 102. It's much finer than this one, which is a 108. The 102 is also a little more flexible. I don't like to use the 102 too much. The sharpness of it lifts up the little paper fibers, therefore it bleeds everywhere with the ink. I don't have to press as hard with the 108. I kind of like it. It gives me a quick, consistent line when I need it. India ink. Most of you know that, I'm sure. This is actually mixed, half and half of Higgins Black Magic and half Koh-i-Noor Rapidograph Universal Black ink. The Higgins by itself is a little too thin for my tastes, and the Koh-i-Noor is a little too thick for my taste for brush work. So I mixed them both and I added a few drops of water, and that does a fine job. Eraser to erase the pages so they're nice and clean when you're all done. Get rid of all the pencil marks and the smudge marks so you can proudly see your line work. Technical pens, I like the Koh-i-Noor Rapidograph. These are for ruling straight lines, long curved lines, or you can even do freehand detail work with them. Whiteout, I use this quite a bit on almost every page I do, and this is a whiteout pen. Some people will use white paint out of a bottle, but it's so easy for me to use. I just dab it on. If I have to touch up with a brush or some more ink, that's fine too. This bulbous thing is used to suck the ink out of my clogged Rapidograph technical pens if I need to. Here are some of the other tools to help guide the inker. First is the 18-inch. Well, I use an 18-inch triangle. This is to rule your straight lines. Got a couple of French curves here. And these will help aid in doing long, slender, curvy lines with the Tech pen. And I have a bunch of circular and elliptical templates. And these just have different sizes and degrees of circular type shapes. You can basically do anything from very, very small circular and elliptical shapes to very large ones. If it gets any bigger than that, I'll just use a French curve and fake my way through it. Finally, I have a drafting arm. Sometimes what I can do is I can pull this tape the actual page onto the surface of the table, and then use a drafting arm which is similar to a T-square, and move it around, and I can make perfect 90-degree angles horizontally and vertically throughout my entire thing just by moving it like that. I don't use it very often. I'll just stick with the triangle to follow the lines. Okay, before we get started, I want to show you a few lines and how they're executed and what they could be used for throughout this entire demonstration. I'm going to start off using my trusty number 2 Winsor & Newton Sable Series 7 brush with India ink, and I will demonstrate some of the inking techniques that will be employed throughout. Okay, the first stroke I'm going to show you in inking is a very common stroke. It's similar to a stroke that would be used in airbrush, and that's called the dagger stroke. And the dagger stroke is basically thin on one end and thick on the other. So it would look like that. It's almost like an elongated teardrop. So you can go thin to thick, or you can go thick to thin. Now obviously the thinner part would be toward the light, and the thick part would be toward areas of shadow. You want to practice a series of them where you're going shorter and then going back longer, just like so. I'm executing these with the brush. You can actually do it with a crow quill pen too, but your line won't become as thick on one end. The crow quill has a limited capability as far as how thick it can get. If you try to press any thicker than what a crow quill is capable of handling, then you might break the tip of the crow quill pen. That's why I like using a brush. You can get an infinite types of lines, you know, with it. You can even do more curved. You can go thick to thin as well. That is what I call the dagger stroke. It's used very commonly in inking. Okay, next thing I'm going to show you is what I call the double-ended taper. It's kind of related to the dagger stroke. It's going to be thin on both sides and thick in the middle. So it's almost like two dagger strokes back to back, but they're connected in the middle. So you're pressing down hard towards the middle, and then you're dragging it out to a thin line. So it just gives the illusion, when you have a series of them together, and it's much easier to do this with the brush than with the pen, that there's light coming on both sides of those series of lines, and in the middle is shadow. You can group them together so then the middles actually touch. You can get smaller, add some cross hatching with the same type of stroke. It doesn't even have to get that thin in the middle. You can use a very subtle double-ended taper. You can also, just like the dagger stroke, you can curve that. All of this takes practice, just like anything else. Just like if you're doing a sport or any other skill, just work on it every day. I mean, I've been using a brush for many years, so that's why I'm able to seemingly do it effortlessly, but it does take effort. Let's see, next thing I want to show you is feathering. Feathering is a series of lines where you go from thin to thick. And the thickness goes into an area of blackness. And it's used where you want a gradual progression from light to dark. You know, not in areas where you want an abrupt darkness from a white area, but you want a gradual progression. Feathering helps accomplish this, especially when you look at it from a distance. Just practicing your feathering. You can do long feathering, gradually getting shorter and stubbier, or you can go the opposite direction. You can overlap it with cross hatching. Right now I'm going longer. And then down here would be an area of black. You can even overlap that with cross hatching, with feathering going in a different direction. You can have your feathering curved, either to the left or to the right. You can do feathering that's really thick and dense, like so. Or you can do feathering that's smaller and a little closer together, I'm going to move over to another line technique, which I've been seeing called the push and pull. And that's basically where it's a line that's blunt on both ends. And what it does is that it indicates a quick gesture. It has a lot of movement to it. It's a very animated line. I'm going to show you how it's done with a crow quill pen. I'm going to use a 102. You're pushing down, you're dragging the line really quickly, and then you're pressing at the end of that line. It just really looks like you did swipe it very quickly with confidence. It's just a really fun technique to use every now and then. You know, you can do a quick dagger stroke and then blob one end right there. Let's do another one. Something like that. Sometimes it looks more animated to have one end of the blob a little bit bigger than the other one, because it also shows a little bit of direction. You can almost kind of get a feel of which direction it was swiped. That's just one technique I'm seeing more and more with the slick inkers. Now, you can also pull that off with a brush. I often just kind of fake that with a brush. I always say that inking is an illusion. You'd be surprised at how some of the lines are pulled off. Some of the lines aren't really pulled off the way you would imagine. Sometimes I'll just take a brush, I'll do a dagger stroke, then I'll blob it on one end. When it's shrunken down, and it'll look like I did it with a pen. It's another variation, but it looks very quick and very confident. It gives a very animated line. Like I said, that can be used in textures and stuff. Sometimes if it's used as a texture and you're going to cross it, sometimes you'll cross it with the same type of line, but you'll go right up to it and then you leave a gap and then you continue on. And it almost gives it a little bit of dimension, like you're highlighting one side of one of the strokes. You can use that in a rocky surface. Sometimes I've seen it used as scars on a body from a hero or villain that's been through a tough fight. So that's the push and pull. I'll show you a quick technique that I use when I do bushes or leaves in a tree in the background. What I'll do, especially if the bush is in silhouette, I'll just literally just squiggle the brush around, purposely leaving little gaps of white, just like so. And then I'll actually blacken in the body of the bush itself. And then even with the brush, I'll just kind of fade it out a little more with some dots. I want some blunt marks. Let's just say it was up against like a brick wall or something. And then here's the ground. No matter how the penciler draws the bush, I mean, I'll kind of use my own little texture on there. If you want, you can even drag like a little contour of it. Just kind of randomize your line, squiggle the line all the way around like that. You want to get really fancy. And then we can draw the person standing right next to it. It's kind of a big bush though, unless the person's in the distant background. But that's the bush technique that I use most of the time. One more quick thing before we move on to the page itself. I'm going to make this black area a little bigger. I'm going to show you how to do some stippling of stars. So we got a black area here, like let's say this is a space and you want to do stars. One thing you can do, and it's a little slower, is you want to take a whiteout pen and you just want to dab some stars. This is a little painstaking because you got to do every single individual star. You know, make some stars bigger, make some smaller, make them more concentrated in certain areas, and other areas you want to leave more of the black showing through. The key is randomness, and the more random it is, the more realistic it'll look. You don't want to space your dots so evenly that it doesn't look real, that it doesn't represent stars in the sky. Another technique for you fancier people, and I have an airbrush here. I'm going to turn on my air compressor. This is an airbrush. If you load it up with white ink or white paint, you can actually do a very quick stipple effect. What I'm going to do is I'm going to crimp the hose to my airbrush. By crimping it, I'm lowering the air pressure. And when I lower the air pressure, I'm actually capable of producing some decent stippling with the white paint. Now, it's a little too fine, but you can see the pattern I can get. By milking the trigger of the airbrush, I can get it pretty randomized, splatters of white. And you get a great randomized pattern of dots, and it's great for stars. If you use black ink, it's also great for texture on the road, and it would be great for blood splatters or rocky textures, anything that you want some extra effect. It's a little more fancy way of applying your stipples. The next technique I have to show you is long feathering coming out from an area of black. As you can see, these are very long, slightly curved lines. How do you approach doing feathering longer than what you're comfortable doing with a brush if your goal is to achieve slick uniformity? So I will show you how to do that. I'm going to blacken this area in with the big brush. Then I'm going to take a rapidograph pen, and what I'm going to do is, using the French curve, I'm going to create the illusion of feathering. And I'm going to basically find the curve that closest resembles these lines. That seems to be good. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to rule a series of lines coming out from that black. These are not feathered, but we will get to the feathering part in a moment. What we're just trying to do is just to rule these in a uniform pattern, evenly spaced, and we could even make the feathers shorter and closer together as we go along. Let's do that too. That's the first series of lines. And now the second series of lines, if you want to create the illusion of a feather, of a thin line going into the thick line, what you do is you angle the French curve a little bit, and you want to draw a second line at an angle that, when filled in with black, will create the illusion of a feather line. You have to be careful not to overlap the first set of lines you put down. It looks like a zigzag pattern. And there you have it. Now just take the brush, load it up with some ink, and very carefully fill in the lines that you created. And when it's all filled in, it'll look like a nice set of feathered lines. And when people ask you, how'd you do that? You can lie and say, I did that with a brush. That'll get you some dates. Just go up to a hot girl in school and show her a set of really long feathered lines and say, hey, I did this with a brush. See if she'll go out with you. Which I guarantee you she will not. And there you have it. And if you want to overlap these with long cross hatching, you can do that too. Or if it's really short cross hatching, you can just do it with the brush. Something like that. And if the ends of your feather lines aren't quite uniform, and you can just take a whiteout pen or some white ink or paint and just kind of get them a little more uniform. That is that. Earlier I spoke about the splatter effect that can be achieved with the airbrush. I'm going to show you how it can also be used with the toothbrush creatively to achieve texture and effects. Let's just do a generic blood splatter, like say somebody is getting blown up, somebody's head's getting blown up. You can throw some stippling effects in there with the brush. Not really stippling effects actually, just big blobs in there to simulate different sizes of blood mass. Good enough. Now here I have a little tray full of ink, and then I have a regular toothbrush. So I'm going to take the toothbrush, I'm going to dab the bristles into the ink. Now this takes a little bit of practice to actually get this technique down and get a general feel of where the splatter will end up on the page. I'm going to take like a regular thicker stock paper, fold it in half for a little stiffness, or if you have a thicker cardboard. I'm going to flick the board against the bristles of the brush. The splatter will go toward that area. There we go. So you're just adding splatter all over. You can do this as much as you want until you get, as much splatter as you want. It really adds to the illusion of just a lot of messy splatter. Now, if you intend to use a toothbrush that you actually use to brush your teeth to do ink splatters, I highly recommend cleaning it out before you brush your teeth again. The final technique I'm going to show is halos. Most of you know what halos are. It's a cool thing to do these days. It's basically the white outline around a figure to separate it from the background. I tend to use it when I want to separate black foreground figures from the black background areas. We have an area of black here running into the figure. This is the head, obviously, the traps, the deltoids, and then we got a series of lines going right into the figure. All you do is basically run the line and you stop it right before you hit the contour of the figure. And then this will be the outline of the beginning black area. Basically, I'm going to go in and create a white outline around the entire figure. And some guys will actually just fill it in all the way right up to the contour of the figure and then just go on with the white ink. But that's more work than I care to do. You tend to want to keep this halo line fairly uniform, especially if you're already playing with line widths on the figure. Otherwise it's just too much. But basically, that's really how you create a halo. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. Then of course all this will be black, going all the way out to the edge. That's it for the techniques, I guess. With that said, let's get started. I have to have this done and sent out tomorrow. I will stress the importance of speed. If you want to become a professional inker, you have to be productive and reliable. You can't meet your deadlines or you can't get enough work done in a timely manner, then you probably will not get hired too often anyway. So let's get started. I'm going to rule off the borders first with my Rapidograph technical pen. So I'm going to rule these with the triangle as far as the size of the line itself. They shouldn't be too thin to where when you reduce these pages it won't show up, but it shouldn't be too thick that it stands out way too much. So I'm just going to double up on these lines to get my line width on the borders, and it looks to be okay. Okay, now that we're all done ruling the panels, I'm going to start doing the real inking. We have 3 panels. We have a monster holding an attractive woman with a superhero flying in from the background, and then a close-up of the superhero's face. He's obviously in anger. And then the moment right before the action, and he tosses the girl aside. There's a cute little duck in the foreground. The first thing I look for when I see a page is, do I need to use any halos? Halos are the white lines that separate objects from each other. It's a fancy and cool thing to do. It's generally used to help separate objects. Now what I'm looking for are blacks that run into each other too much. And if there are, I might have to separate with a halo. Everything looks pretty good, which is nice. It'll save me some time for this deadline. I'm going to start with the number 1 brush and my bottle of ink. I'm going to outline all the black areas first. Let's go. Some people will start inking from first panel, second panel, third panel in succession until it's all complete. Some people will do just the contours or the outlines first. I like to do the blacks first. There's room for error on the blacks. I don't do any warm-up. Some inkers do. That's how I warm up, is basically do the blacks. So here we go. I like to ink with a brush simply because I have the most control with it. I can get an infinite variety of lines and line shapes. It lays down the ink pretty fast. But there are inkers out there who ink with the pen first and then they'll fill stuff in later with the brush. Whatever works for you. Basically, I'm just putting in my blacks right now. And when I mark X, it reminds me to fill it in with black later. That's kind of the comic book code letter for black. The brush is quite hard to control for somebody who's beginning to learn. It's just something that takes time to get used to. You don't have much of a support. If you notice, I'm leaning my right hand against my left index finger for a little bit of stabilization. And that's just a habit that I've developed since I was a kid learning to use a brush. But don't focus so much on the point of the brush as it lays down the line. The trick is to lay down the ink at a beginning point and then look at your target where you're trying to drag the brush to and just go there. Don't even think about it. If you think about it, your line will get wobbly and then you'll second guess yourself in the middle of the stroke. Just see it and go to it. That's something that will get better as you practice more and more. When you get really good with the brush, then you can actually apply that to other things, like for instance, if you like to do watercolor painting with a brush or acrylic painting. Inking has really complemented my other mediums for brush work. Now I'm just laying down the basic black areas right now. I might do a little bit of contouring. So I'm pretty much following the lines right now, not really doing anything fancy at the moment. As you can see, the monster's skin has texture. Texture just means the surface quality of any object. If I use smooth lines all over the monster, that's not going to help convey the scaly and bumpy effect of his skin. Well, I did some feathering there. Feathering is an inking technique I'll elaborate more on later. Now, when I'm inking around the female character, I do want nice smooth lines because you don't want too many hard jagged lines on women. That will harden their look quite a bit and in my opinion really takes away from their attractiveness. If there are feathering or some hatch marks, some cross hatching coming out from black areas, some inkers will actually ink those into the blacks as they're doing the blacks. I usually outline the blacks and then I'll throw in the hatching and cross hatching later and the feathering later. Here's an area where I don't want to ink so smoothly around his leg because of texture. So knowing that, I'm going to make the contour of his leg a little more random. Just some dots, some broken lines, different line widths. I'm actually going to thicken up on this a bit because I want these lines on his leg to actually separate itself from the background, which I'll use thinner lines. That seems to be like a little light. on the dark side of the background building. The more delicate, smaller areas like the fingers here, I'm trying to be really careful. I don't want to have sloppy lines that cross each other and overlap, so I'm trying to be careful.